In the midst of the presidential race, the Republican Party is still trying to do away with social programs for millions of Americans. The House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan released the Republicans' new budget proposal today. It looks like the old one. It's another attempt to push through tax cuts, defense spending, and deficit reduction at the expense of the most vulnerable Americans.
It's about turning our system that has become a dependent culture into an upward mobile society, getting people back on the lives of self-sufficiency. We are here to offer Americans the chance to choose which future they want for themselves.
The future offered by Ryan's plan is bleak for everyone except the most fortunate Americans. Just like last year's plan, Ryan's budget gets rid of Medicare as it exists, as we know it today. Financing for Medicaid coverage would be reduced, affecting the elderly and the disabled. More than 30 million Americans would lose their health care coverage. The budget has substantial cuts to food stamps, housing assistance. Listen up, farmers. Subsidies would be cut. The IRS and the FBI, transportation, science programs, education services, prisons, border control, student loans, FEMA, and unemployment insurance all would be reduced dramatically. Meanwhile, corporations and the wealthy get $3 trillion worth of tax cuts over the next 10 years. The Pentagon budget would also get a good boost. Ryan says the Republican presidential nominees, well, they're going to be on board with the plan.
I think all of our candidates have campaigned on these various ideas. Our nominee owes it to the country to give them a choice of two futures. We're helping him do that. And each of these people running for president have all given their various ideas and reforms with perfectly jive or consistent with what we're proposing.
And you wholeheartedly believe they will accept your budget?
Absolutely.
The Republican candidates need to support the Ryan plan. Just ask Newt Gingrich. Last year, Gingrich called the Ryan budget right-wing social engineering. He was hammered over his comments by conservative pundits and voters.
What you just did to Paul Ryan is unforgivable.
I didn't do anything to Paul Ryan.
Yes, you did. You undercut him and his allies in the House.
No,
You're an embarrassment to our party.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Why don't you get out before you make a bigger fool of yourself?
Sorry you feel that way.
Gingrich learned his lesson. This time, he released a statement saying, "My plan to grow the economy and balance the budget differs in details but shares the same core principles as Ryan's impressive effort. As president, I would work very closely with Chairman Ryan to reform government and balance the budget." Gingrich may be singing a different tune, but voters have not changed their minds. Ryan released a very similar budget last year with the same cuts to programs like Medicare. Democrats campaigned hard against the Ryan budget in a New York congressional election and won the seat. Voter attitudes have not changed. Recent polling shows a majority of people in every political group say they want Medicare left as it is. Paul Ryan says his budget is about a choice of visions for America. Most Americans have already rejected Ryan's vision. Let's bring in Steve Schmidt tonight, MSNBC contributor and Republican strategist who served as a senior advisor to Senator John McCain's presidential campaign. And also with us tonight, Eugene Robinson, MSNBC political, also an associate editor and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post. Gentlemen, great to have you with us tonight. Steve, let me ask you first, Steve. I mean, the top 1% would get a $150,000 tax break under this Ryan plan. And there is no polling out there that supports that this is where the country wants to go. So how are the Republicans going to be able to support this plan and win in November?
Look, I think, Ed, I disagree, obviously, with some of your characterizations of the plan. I think that this is a serious governing blueprint for Republicans. I think it presents a big choice, a big difference between the president's vision and the Republican vision. But Republicans have to do a better job than they did last year communicating the virtues of this. This is a revenue-neutral plan. The tax codes are flattened to two rates, 25%, 10%, so people's tax rates do go down. But this is a plan that I think can encourage economic growth, that lead prosperity and lead to an economic recovery. But the Republicans are going to have to be able to go out and to communicate this against what I think you previewed is going to be a very effective line of attack.
Is it going to be hard for them to go on the campaign and sell this? I mean, we're talking about tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. We're talking about changing Medicare. There really hasn't been any polling that shows that this is what the American people want. There's two issues right there. And, of course, it adds to the budget deficit, but it balances it on the backs of the most vulnerable Americans. It would seem to me, Eugene Robinson, that would be a pretty tough sell.
I think that's an awfully tough sell, Ed, and it's interesting because the House Republicans did learn something from the first experience. When they talk about tax reform, they don't really specify what loopholes are going to be closed because, gee, you're not in an election you're going to come out and say, let's the mortgage deduction. In terms of Medicare, they say, well, leave the current seniors alone, and maybe, and then we'll hit them in 10 years or so. But I think this is a really tough sell, and I don't think you're going to see the Republican presidential candidates embracing this plan lock, stock, and barrel.
Democrats are already hitting the budget pretty hard. Here's a commercial from the liberal advocacy group Americans United for Change.
But like Weekend at Bernie's, even when no one in America wanted to see Weekend at Bernie's too, they went ahead and made the sequel anyway. The same bad movie where Medicare is targeted for assassination by Wall Street suits, plotting to get their hands on seniors' benefits, scheming to make record insurance industry profits by digging deeper and deeper into seniors' pockets.
Steve, as a strategist, from what you know of the Ryan budget that was released today, what's the most effective way to communicate that you think the American people should go for this?
Look, at the end of the day, the country is on a pathway to insolvency. The question about Medicare, where respondents are saying they want no changes to Medicare, there are going to be changes to Medicare because Medicare is going broke. And it's going to take responsible people from both political parties to sit in a room and to hash out an agreement on how to restore solvency to the country, or we're going to hit a cliff, not unlike what's going on in Europe. So I think that Republicans are going to have to communicate clearly to the American people the consequences and the stake and the looming insolvency of the country, and to talk about how to create jobs, how to create economic opportunity, and to cast this through the prism of how a rising tide lifts all boats. So Republicans have their work cut out for them on this, but again, I think this is a serious plan that's going to take a serious commitment for go out and to explain and to communicate clearly and honestly with the American people. And I would say with regard to the ad, at least it's a step up from the ad where the Paul Ryan actor is pushing the old lady over the cliff. So okay, maybe we're headed in the right direction a little bit.
As far as the conversation goes. Well, some would argue that going over the cliff with a bigger boost in military spending when we are drawing down in Iraq, we're drawing down in Afghanistan. Gene, what about that?
Yeah, again, most of the American people, I think it's time for some defense cuts and think it's time for us to pull back to a certain extent. They want the country to be safe, but they don't think we ought to be involved in simultaneous 10-year wars around the globe, and don't think the Defense Department is going to need all that money. So, again, that's hard to defend. Medicare is especially difficult because while, yes, people want it fixed, but if the fix is partial privatization or full privatization or whatever you want to call it, that's something people don't like. And I don't think that's going to change, frankly. So I think we're going to have to find some different way to fix it.
Steve, on the other side of the conservative spectrum, there are already members of Congress saying that they're not going to vote for the Ryan budget because they think it doesn't go far enough. Is the Tea Party creating a difficult situation for Republicans? Ryan today at that press conference said everybody's going to be on board. The Tea Partiers are already stirring about that it doesn't go far enough.
Well, I think one of the tensions, Ed, that you have in the Republican primary process is you saw this fundamental abrogation of Republican principles during much of the last decade, particularly with the delay Congress, where all of these principles of limited government, of responsible fiscal stewardship, they all went out the window for political expediency. And the Republican Party's enraged about it.